entirety of His creation as well.
Okay, so God knows then everything that can be known, and then you're stating that what's future for us is knowable to God.
What is future to us is knowable to God. Well, yes, most definitely, because I believe what is future to us is determined by the decree of God. As I mentioned, I quoted from the Westminster Confession when I presented my opening thesis. So, yes, it is most definitely known to Him.
Okay. So if God knows...
Not just passively. I just want to make sure you understand what I'm not talking about just SF here. I'm not talking about just simple foreknowledge.
Right. Yes. No. And yes, I understand that. So would God, in your view, know, for instance, what it's like to be? You were recently. I can't remember if you or Simon was recently caught in a traffic jam in Tampa.
Anyone who lives in Tampa understands that.
Does God know what it's like to be frustrated?
Does God know what it's like to be frustrated? Well, I would say since God became man in the person of Jesus Christ, most definitely He would know the whole realm of human emotions that do not involve sin experientially. And since He is the one who created all things, including mankind, then He knows our hearts and our minds fully, and therefore He would know it from that perspective. But since there would be elements of frustration that God would not experientially know, in the sense of those that are sinful. Mm-hmm. If I am... Example, I have been trying desperately to get hold of a Heuer chess champion chess clock. For 28 years I've wanted one, and I placed a bid on one on eBay today, and the bid expired while we were driving here, and I don't know whether I got it or not. And I could very well end up being frustrated, and I will confess, possibly sinfully frustrated, when I get home tonight and look at my email and discover that someone has yet once again stolen one of these clocks out from underneath me. So I would not say that God experientially would know anything that would flow from a sinful, either an attitude or a sinful limitation of ignorance or something along those lines.
Okay. So then Jesus was frustrated. Not sinfully in any sense, but you say Jesus was frustrated.
I am quite certain that living with sinful parents and sinful siblings, that would result in a fair amount of that, yeah.
Okay. Would God know what it's like to be me?
What it's like to be what?
Me.
To be you?
Yeah.
In the sense of the fact that He has absolutely perfect knowledge of your past, your personality, your character. He would certainly know it in that sense, but since to be you involves also the experience of your creaturely sinfulness, if you're trying to make that an experiential type of knowledge, then I would not say He would have...
I wouldn't bring sinfulness in at all.
Well, I would say that I don't know how to define being me, because sadly, being me involves sin.
Well, okay, but what I'm referring to is personal identity.
He knows your personal identity better than you do, but He's not lived your personal identity.
Okay, so God doesn't have consciousness of my personal identity. That is, the identity that I have. He knows about it, but He doesn't know.
Since your personal consciousness would include the experience of sin, if we're talking experientially, no. He knows, since He knows your sin perfectly, however, I would say that He certainly knows the entirety of your experience, yes.
Okay. Well, I wasn't trying to bring sin into it at all.
I wasn't trying to deflect the question. I was just simply saying, as far as I can see, your question requires a recognition that we as fallen human creatures have experienced that, and that is part and parcel of who we are.
Yeah. No, I'm just talking about personal identity. But since you brought up sin, would God know what it's like to be tempted to sin over again? That is, having sinned once, would God know what it was like to be tempted again?
Experientially, or the fact that he knows every single person who's ever been tempted twice perfectly?
Yeah, experientially.
Well, again, since God cannot lie, then no, God has not experienced what it means to be tempted over again, especially if that involves having fallen the first time.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Does God know what time it is now?
Far better than my little visor here does, yes.
Okay, so God...
He's the creator of time.
God has a now.
God knows, you asked me if God knows what time it is. Now, obviously, the very question assumes a spatial location, a temporal location, and a geographical location. God knows exactly what time it is where we are, and He knows exactly what time it is any place else that you would like to ask Him. That does not limit His being temporally, so that He is experiencing a progression of events so that the future is unknown to Him.
Do you affirm a particular theory of time? You know, the so-called A theory or tense theory, the B theory, the stasis theory?
I believe I've made very clear that, especially as I see, again, I try to drive this primarily from the exegesis text of Scripture. God says over and over again in Isaiah 40 through 48 that He is with He's the one who brings forth the generations. He's with the beginning and the end. And that the connection that I see made exegetically over and over again in this passage, this section of Isaiah, is between God being the creator and God being the creator of time. And so I believe that time exists because God has created. I believe it's dependent upon Him for its form, its function, and its reality. And the events that take place within it, the warp and woof of that time, flows from His sovereign decree over it. However you want to identify that particular perspective, I hope you understand that I'm not seeking to avoid a label. It's just that my coming at this comes at it from my dealing especially with those who deny monotheism in the Mormon faith. This is really what first brought me to these passages, was their belief that God had become a God over time. And that's really what has brought my attention to those passages and really has informed where I'm going with that.
Well, the reason I was wondering is because if one affirms the B theory or stasis theory of time, then time is real in both directions. The past still exists and the future exists. Now, we haven't experienced the future. But the future exists contemporaneously for God. And one can say that God knows which event will follow another, but what are called tensed facts